Well, a very, very good morning to you, and great to have your company on Marketplace Live. And as the clock strikes 9 a.m. local time, we can tell you that free agency for the next NBL season is now officially open, which means that we on Marketplace Live are now officially open for business. I'm Jack Heverin. Got an all-star panel here to work our way through day one of NBL free agency. And I start, of course, with the best newsbreaker in Australian basketball, Olgun, Uluc, who's already dropped a couple of bombs on us this morning. Great to have you with us.
Thanks. Everything's been leading up to this day. It's been like a whole year in the making. So I'm excited. We're going to get into everything today, which I'm excited about.
This is Olgun's grand final for those watching on at home. Derek Rucker, good to see you. Some big names that we're going to have a look at very, very shortly.
Of course, Jack, and I'm looking forward just to breaking down how players fit in new situations, hypotheticals, possible player movements. It's all very exciting. We love this day, Hools.
And Hools, great to see you. Pete Hooley, you've had a really good look at every team's contract situation, those in contract, those out of contract. We'll work our way through those across the morning too.
Yeah, plenty to talk about. As you said, some signings, some agreeing to terms already, and then a lot of whispers. You hear teams linked to a lot. I know your fingers are already moving. It is your Super Bowl day, Olgun, so I enjoy this. There's a lot to play out, big dominoes to fall. There's all of that, and that's the beautiful part of this show and this time of year. So
a couple of signings already. Olgun, you've released those. We'll get to those in just a few moments. A reminder as well, if you've got any questions for us across the morning, you can hit us up. We can put you on screen and we can answer your questions. Just follow the NBL on Instagram and all the social media channels. Drop a question and this panel of learned gentlemen will get to them across the morning. Let's start with Bryce Cotton. Before we get to those who have just dropped in the last few minutes, he's obviously the biggest name in free agency as we start today. Later on in the show, we'll explore all of his options. But as we talk right now, what do we think happens next?
This is a tough one, and I guess as a purist and a lover of the NBL, I want Bryce to stay. I want to see him extend his legacy and see where that can go. How great can this man be? But I have a feeling that's not going to eventuate.
Interesting. Again, we've been talking about the clubs that are linked, and then Olgun brought up Melbourne United. One of the first marketplaces we did a couple of months ago being interested, the Brisbane Bullets. You heard them floating around a little bit. I spoke to Bryce after he posted on Instagram about leaving Perth, saying goodbye to them, and he still hadn't decided at the time. There's obviously a lot going on. He's playing very well in Puerto Rico, but seemed like at the time as well he was enjoying living in the moment, which he probably hasn't had to do for a little while. So it's interesting to see what comes up next, but wherever it's going to be, you know, it's going to be well deserved. And I don't know if it's going to be the end of him in the NBL if he doesn't come back this year.
I agree with that. Like in the immediate future, I don't see Bryce Cotton back in the NBL. He has a ton of options on the table, and from what I understand, he hasn't decided. He's a ton of options. He's going to gauge them when the time comes. But him and his family are preparing to exist overseas. That is what's happening right now. So that's why in the immediate future, I don't see him back in the NBL.
And it's interesting because normally we talk about big dominoes to fall where we'd be thinking, okay, Bryce Cotton is the one. What's going to happen? There's a couple of clubs that are linked to him. He's already said goodbye to Perth. When Bryce Cotton decides, everyone else will make their moves. I think everybody else has not moved on without him as such, but it's not going to say put all our eggs in the Bryce Cotton basket. If we don't get him, we're in a bit of strife.
And that's the reason that we flagged it straight away here on the marketplace, is because his decision will have flow-on effects for so many teams.
It certainly will, and I think, you know, when you talk about a player of Bryce's magnitude and what he can do, not only for your chances of winning championships, but commercially, the fan engagement, selling jerseys, the popularity of the guy, he is one of the more enticing and attractive figures throughout Australian sport. And I just wish there was a way that we could keep him here. Like, you know.
Have you got any spare cash?
I do not. I do not have that type of money, Jack. But when you look at, you know, guys making a fan out of media members, Bryce is probably the leader of that. And I know, you know, you call him the benchmark. And for him to be able to play here, and I know you guys say that he may be back in the NBL in the future, but it's not going to be prime Bryce. And right now we're losing a guy who just has come off, arguably, his best season as a pro. If he goes away for the next 3, what are we getting when he comes back? And that's what bothers me.
But there's some sort of anomalies to that as well. I mean, Chris Golding, 37 this year, he's coming off one of his best seasons, best scoring season since his rookie year, I believe, or 2013. Bryce Cotton turns 33 this year, coming off an outstanding, best statistical year he's had. So who's to say that he can't keep this up for the next 5-6 years?
Well, you look at Steph Curry and the level he's playing at his age. So we know now with sports science and technology and everything, and Bryce looks after himself very well. He has genetics. He's a brilliant athlete. So maybe he can come back at 36 or 37 as an MVP.
And if he returned at 36 and you don't have him as an MVP prediction preseason, you're foolish. It's just who he is.
He'll make another of these. I'll walk to somewhere predictions again. So that's one of the biggest cogs of free agency. And the reason we flag that is that it's got flow-on effects, as we mentioned, for so many other teams. Matthew Dellavedova, Olgun, is the other big one here. Now, I can't think of a situation, Derek, you've been around a lot longer than I have, but I can't think of a situation where we've had a player essentially jet-setting around Australia, listening to offers from different teams. And again, Delhi's decision is going to have knock-on effects for so many others.
In my time covering the league, which is going on a decade, it's the first time I've ever seen this, where it's Matthew Dellavedova flying himself to all of these places to make sure that he can get a lay of the land wherever he goes. And from what I hear about all of these places, everyone's on edge. Because Matthew Dellavedova, from like an attention to detail perspective, is at the very top of the list. And so they're making sure that he arrives, all right, we are organized. We are making sure that like everything is spick and span, everything is clean. Like we have every detail locked in. They are making sure of that, because if you want Matthew Dellavedova, the professional, you have to present yourself as that sort of organization.
And this is the type of quality character he is. We know what he can do on the basketball court in terms of performances. But there are several clubs out there, and we'll touch on it more in depth later, that need the spine and the brain of Matthew Dellavedova.
So is this part of the biggest appeal with Matthew Dellavedova? We know he's a winner. We saw his form in the championship series. He was the championship MVP. Is this why he appeals to some organisations so much? Because of the standards and the professionalism and all of those things that he brings off the court?
You don't want to diminish what he is as a player, right? Because we saw it toward the end of this season especially. He's still an elite player. But the cultural part of this is the key. You bring him in, the cultural dimension of your franchise shifts like extraordinarily just because of having this guy in your team.
And it also helps with all the other little pieces you get to put around him. So the bench guys, the young stars you get coming in, they get to learn from one of the best who have been there, done that. All of that comes into the package of what you're trying to buy when you get Matthew Dellavedova. The professionalism for sure, the culture piece. Yes, he can still play at a very high level. He showed that this year. He's the ultimate trust guy. You're just going to throw him out there in any situation. You know he's going to be under control. He's going to get things done for your team. But when you bring in then the youngsters, I mean, we'll talk about Flynn Cameron as well, but Flynn Cameron had to sit behind him, Chris Golding, every single day in practice, do all of that. So all of that made Flynn Cameron a better player. So anyone else who you sign alongside a guy like Delhi is going to benefit for that for the long run.
All that's still to come, and we'll talk the pros and cons of Matthew Dellavedova's decision. This is like the NBL's version of the decision, this one, isn't it? We'll have to wait and see. We'll talk about all the pros and cons of that very shortly. Josh Bannon on the agenda this morning. The new Brisbane Bullets coach is one that we didn't have in our rundown this time yesterday. Flynn Cameron, Sunday Detch, Yanni Wetzel, McQuatch Malawatch, just to name a few. That is all still to come. Keandre Cook is another as well. But Olgun, you've got your phone in hand right now because you have been letting a few fly before free agency even opened at 9 a.m. this morning. Let's start with Isaac White signing with Adelaide. This is one that I think for Adelaide 36ers fans, they have been screaming for Isaac White to come home for 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah, so this is a 2-year deal for Isaac White, and you know, you can almost put aside the fact that he is from Adelaide, and obviously the 36ers wanted to bring him home, and there is an appeal of going home, but this is more Isaac White seeing an opportunity. There's a role there, there are minutes there at the backup 1 and 2 for him, and the 36ers looking at someone who fills a need for them, which is a ball carrier, a shooter, someone who can guard, play with pace, which is something they want to do this season. And when you talk about a 36ers organization that has been quite dramatic over the past few seasons, bringing someone like Isaac White in, a Stanford grad, a high character guy, ask players on every team he's been on. He's a high culture, high character guy. He is someone who helps that team for the better on and off the court.
And I thought last season with Brisbane, we started to see what he was capable of doing from the three-point line. He shot at almost 42% after struggling the year before. But the thing is, in Brisbane's offense last year, which was high ISO on the offensive end, and you could see Isaac White just clamoring for some structure, some organization on the offensive end. Even if that means playing at a higher pace, you can play fast but still be organized. And if that's what Adelaide intends to do, then it's going to be a great fit for Isaac. But I think from Adelaide's point of view, it's always good, Pete, to bring back those South Australian players. Maybe not you, but for the most part, that's how they built their success over the years.
And again, we talk about Isaac White and the links to home. It is good, you say, to bring back that local talent and bring back someone who you know is going to have a role and have an impact. So he averaged the most minutes per game of his career so far. He's been in the NBL 5 years, 15 minutes, 6.5 points, but it was the way he shot the ball, 41.5% from three, which makes it enticing. The reason why I love this fit even more so from an Adelaide perspective, they were last in the league in bench scoring. So you understand you're getting a guy who's not going to be afraid to come in, and his role could change if you've got injuries to Vasiljevic, foul trouble, whatever it is. You're going to slot him in there at the starting. We saw it at the back end of Brisbane's season when they had injuries. He just steps in with confidence. He's always ready for his moment, and that's going to help. They cleaned out a lot of that bench. They're going to go kind of fresh in that regard and understand what they're building up there, and it's a good starting point.
But he was a key part of that 6-2 run that Brisbane had in the middle of the season. Remember, they went down to Adelaide on Christmas Eve, and he went off in that game, and then he followed it up with another good game, and then he was kind of relegated back to the Odyssey land and really never got a good opportunity to show what he was doing. And I think with a different structure, Mike Wells will be he'll have a better feel of what the league is about. He'll have a better idea how to use players. And I think without Kendrick Davis, who I imagine is not returning, and without Montrezl Harrell, very talented but volatile players, I think there will be more serenity in the basketball program, and I think that is the position in which Isaac White can thrive.
Volatile is the right word, and I think that has to be a key theme for Adelaide all season, doesn't it? When they're building this roster, is just spend more time worrying about what's happening on the basketball court rather than what's happening during the week. I mean, with the greatest respect, at times in the last 2 years, Adelaide have been a bit of a circus in terms of what's happening off the court. That has to be a factor when they're starting to build their roster, doesn't it? About just getting solid citizens who are going to be easy to manage.
Well, Pete, we know it's a mental drain week to week, day to day, worrying about what type of mood is this guy in today when he comes to training. What's his deal today?
You're walking on eggshells, right?
You're walking on, exactly. And no one wants to worry about that. You just need to worry about performance and getting better every day. It is so hard to win basketball games in this competition. There's only 10 teams. It is so difficult to win games. You need so many things going in your favor. You need to generate momentum on an hourly and a daily basis. I know that sounds like hyperbole, but it's factual.
And the way they've started this free agency with getting that local group, the bench group, because there's no big dominoes to fall import-wise outside of Bryce Conn, but that's not going to happen this year, especially for Adelaide. Adelaide's not in the Delhi sweepstakes, so it's not worried. And I spoke to Matt Weston. I know you've reported things about Kendrick and Montrez, but it's the right way to do it. Let's get the locals who are available, who we can build around. Let's get that stability. We've got Vasiljevic locked in. We've got Isaac Humphries locked in. We've got the local talent already as the marquee guys. But then they have no trouble spending money and no trouble finding imports as well. There's no rush for that now, so this is the right way to start. And I think Isaac White, and I look at the stats, he's only had 1 year he's averaged 2 3-point attempted a game. I got a feeling that's going to have to be at 3 to 4 because he's going to have a role, he's going to enjoy it, and he'll relish it.
But Pete, from his perspective also, he needs to go out there with an aggressive mindset. Okay,
that's the only way he knows how to play.
This is my thing coming off the bench, no doubt, and establish himself right away as the main trigger coming off of that Adelaide bench. And now I like the composition of their local players. We're forgetting about Lat Mayen. And Lat Mayen is a guy who I thought, had he not been injured at that point during the season, he was showing signs, and then late in the season he started to come on again. But
I don't think Lat Mayen's going back.
Really?
My feel he's off contract. My feel is that he's not going back to Adelaide.
And where do you think he'll land?
We'll wait and see. But
hang on.
But from what I understand right now, it's probably not Adelaide.
Okay, well, one that they can add, and they have added this morning, is Michael Harris. Olgun, you reported this a short time ago. Again, the Perth Wildcats fans, I think will be disappointed to hear this one, that they like the look of Michael Harris. He played NBL 1 West last season and totally balled out. He's playing for the mighty Frankston Blues this year in NBL 1 South. I reckon Perth fans are going to hear this and they're going to be a little disappointed that he's leaving.
Yeah, and both of these signings are pointing to how Adelaide wants to play this coming season, which is they want to play fast, they want to shoot a lot of threes. This past season was sort of an anomaly. They brought in Montrezl Harrell, and they could only play one way. That you were almost forced to start him, then you're playing with two bigs. All of a sudden, the floor is really shrunken, and you just it's a bit icky out there. You can't play with pace. You can't play outside in because you have these two big guys that you have to go through. And so now you have Isaac White off the bench, Michael Harris. You have these shooters, and so they're a team that I think wants to play with pace, get up and down, and shoot a ton of threes. Michael Harris helped them with that. And another Adelaide kid, too.
Harris has shown some aptitude in the past. He's got some potential there, but where are the legs in his game? Like, I'm unsure. I'm unsure about his ability to defend. And Adelaide, again, has not been a strong defensive unit over the past few years. I know Wells wants to improve in that regard, but he'll have a chance now, Harris, in Adelaide more than he would have had in Perth.
Well, based on just a couple of these first early signings, they're going to try and score more than the opposition. Right?
Well, they tried to do that this year.
But they've got some key pieces they're chasing in order to do that. But Michael Harris has only averaged 8 minutes a game. That's the best he's averaged in the 4 seasons at Perth. So he still needs the extended opportunity to show that he's ready for it. So you've got to give him that chance, which is it. But them not bringing back Nick Marshall, and we'll talk about Nick Marshall later on. Nick Marshall's had 3 double-digit average minutes game so far this in his career. The last 3 averaged 16 minutes per game last year. We know he started for the Adelaide 36ers, so they couldn't get Nick Marshall's best. So now it's Michael Harris to come in there and kind of slot into a role where, hey, we're going to give you the opportunity here. Local kid, you can come in, shine for us. And again, we talk about it, we don't really know on the NBL level. I stud in NBL 1, but this is now his opportunity to go in there and make an impact. And until we see it with 16, 18 minutes a game, you can't knock it because I think it's a chance for him to thrive.
So he's got it. Obviously, he has to prove it, right? But he comes in as a 9th or 10th guy on this roster. And you look at the shooting and you look at the size and you think, all right, what can we extract out of this? This is a really low-risk move for Adelaide. If you can get him and turn him into a reasonable bench scorer, that's an absolute tick for them. And come the playoffs, when these rotations get cut down to maybe 8, is he someone who cracks that rotation? If he's not, then that's not the end of the world.
Let me ask you this, Hool. Sorry, Jack. Net positive for Adelaide, Harris for Marshall?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a way, and again, I think the way they're going to be building towards and what they're going for. As we said, I think we've seen Nick Marshall. He's had his opportunities. He probably hasn't taken them in the way that he would have liked. I mean, that's obvious, but there'll be another opportunity for him elsewhere. Sometimes you just need a change of scenery. 2-year deal, you said?
2-year deal, mutual on the second.
So 1-year deal. That's a 1-year deal.
I don't understand. I'm with you. I'm not. My agent.
Is that from experience?
My agent would never do that. My agent would never allow a mutual second. It's like, hey, yo,
it's a club. That's a club option.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think your credits were a little bit higher, to be honest, when it came to doing contract. So the Adelaide, you asked me to say that. So the Adelaide contract situations as they stand right now, we'll have a look at all of the teams across the morning as well. But on screen, this is who is in contract versus those who are currently out of contract. So with Isaac and DJ coming back already, they kind of had the core of a really good 5-man and a really good shooter as well. There's some bench depth there, Derek, but there's still a lot of pieces to play out, but it's a decent start for Adelaide.
Yeah, it's a good start, and I just think they need to find some complementary role players, some guys that bring some winning culture to the program, and again, the emotional stability, I believe, is key because, look, Mike Wells, despite his age, is an inexperienced head coach, and we saw the fragility in him throughout the course of the season when he had to deal with vitriol. Okay, so do your coach a solid, bring in some high character, low emotional guys, and let him focus on what he needs to do as opposed to trying to be some type of behavioral coach.
So over the last season, we saw the Illawarra Hawks and how much their depth helped them through winning a championship. When you look at that depth chart, you look at who's contracted. You look at Ben Christie, Keanu Rasmussen, Michael Harris. These are 3 guys who, let's say theoretically, that's like the last 3 guys of their roster. They're relatively unproven at the NBL level, right? They haven't demonstrated a significant amount. And so 1 or 2 of them, probably 3 of them, will have to step up and demonstrate that they can be effective at this level if this Adelaide 36ers team wants to be able to get through the rigors of a season, because that depth is important. So that's the key. If those 3 can step up, then the 36ers have a chance, because you talk about their 2 locals. The 36ers and the Sydney Kings are ahead of every other team because they've got their marquees set.
Yep.
Right? They have their marquees, they can build imports around them. There's a good foundation there, but they do need those other guys to step up.
It's an obvious one too, but those 2 imports they get, if 2 or 3, it's make or break for the championship, right? And again, it's interesting. One is the point guard spot. That's always key. You look at the teams that keep winning championships, they've got that key piece in the point guard position to help lead the team. And then they decide what's the most important import. Is it the 3-man or is it the 4? Now, last year, obviously, they went with Montrez, let Main slot into the 3-man a little bit with Sunday Detch. If those 2 aren't coming back, which doesn't look like it, do they prioritise the 3 or the 4 as the most important import signings? Because you can't have 3 high-level imports that are all paid extremely well, all demand a lot of the ball. You need to have that third, I don't want to say budget, but you need to have that third complementary import to kind of help. So the point guard has to be number one, and then you have to decide, are we going to go down the wing? Are we chasing an Antonius Cleveland type in the wing to try and help facilitate, bring it all together? Or do we need someone who's going to be an impact power forward alongside Isaac Humphries? If it was me, I'm doing the 3. I think you've got Isaac Humphries there. We've shown what he can do when he's a focal point of the offense. Let's lock in a point guard, let's lock in a 3, and then whoever we get to fill the power forward spot, we'll go from there.
Right now, they're chasing a point guard, of course, and they're chasing an import 4. That's what they're looking for. And an import,
you've got to have a good 4 in this
But an import 4 is more of, it's a traditional wing. Right, it's 2025. An import 4 is just a sort of bigger 3-man. That's how this works. And they want to play with pace. They want to be able to shoot. That guy has to be able to shoot the ball in order to maximize that point guard and to maximize Isaac Humphries. So they're chasing those 2 spots. And from what I understand, I think they'll get to the midway point of the season and determine whether they need a 3rd import. Because at that point, they would have 4 combined marquees and imports. So it's that 1 and 4. And from what I understand, priority 1, 2, and 3 is high character. Because they've been through this before, where they haven't prioritized that, and everyone around the league has heard the stories about what happened in that team over the past season. They want to avoid that. They want to actively get out of that sort of being that sort of club, being perceived as that sort of franchise. High character is the key for those 2 spots.
Is Jerome Martin a chance?
I don't believe so.
The other thing they need is perimeter defenders.
Yeah.
And in the 1 and 2, they were poor last season defensively. You look at the metrics on their 1 and 2s last year, it was league bottom. And if they don't improve that in a perimeter strong league, they're going to be in trouble no matter what they do with the 4.
They should look at the Illawarra Hawks and what they did from a point guard perspective in protecting Tyler Harvey.
Yep.
And I say protecting. Tyler Harvey stepped up defensively this season, but he's a smaller guard.
Sure.
DJ is a smaller guard too. So bringing in someone who can sort of make up for some of the size that DJ's lacking is probably an important thing. And then as far as like the perimeter defense, they are eyeing some of the sort of wings, defensive-minded wings that are on the market. And we've seen that you don't have to have the highest level guy there. You know, Wainiswaka-Labuluk is an elite defender. Like, he was that guy for the Illawarra Hawks. You can have a sort of elite role player in that spot. I think that's what they're looking for.
So news that, Olgun, you've also just released in the last little while is that of Ben Ayre. So Ben Ayre, his name has come up, and even with some of the fan questions, and a reminder, you can leave us your questions. We'll start working our way through those very shortly. There's a link on the NBL's Instagram stories as well. But Ben Ayre's name seems to have attracted a lot of interest from fans across the league. And, well, he's got a signature and he's got a new home. He's just switching from one green team to another.
He is. So Ben Ayre is advanced talks on a 2-year deal with the Jack Jumpers. Now, a mutual option on the 2nd year of that deal. Relax. Now, the thing with this is, this Tasmania Jack Jumpers team, yes, they were missing a lot of players and that affected them, but they were one of the worst offensive teams we've seen in a while over a stretch of that season. Bringing someone like Ben Ayre in is someone who can sort of shore up that area. When things aren't going well, he's a spark plug, someone who can come in, hit shots, hits a 3 ball at a high level. So he helps one of their big deficiency from this past season, which is just putting points on the board.
And unfortunately for Sean McDonald, he does get hit by the injury bug. We saw him go down twice last season, and we don't know how much burden you want to put on him early in the season. They're probably going to monitor his load, and that's a perfect opportunity for Ben Ayre to come in there early in the season, establish himself. And I actually like the Tasmania setup from an offensive perspective for Ben Ayre. And defensively, he's underrated as a guard. I think he gets in there, he battles, he gives you effort, but he's never going to lack confidence. And I think Scott Roth really enjoys coaching those types of players.
I mean, he's proven time and time again he's an NBL player.
Yep.
Right? I know he hasn't had the consistent opportunities. I mean, he averaged 5 points this year, but he halved his minutes played. It was 23 minutes at the back end of the Phoenix season the year before. We know the struggles they went through with just putting a team on the floor in that year. But every time he's had an opportunity, he's taken it with both hands and run with it. And again, I know the Phoenix probably would have liked to keep him. I spoke to a lot of people down in southeast Melbourne, but with the way they're going and the other pieces they look at, some things have to give, and they couldn't end up keeping Ben Ayre. But he's proven that he belongs at this level, and I do like it for the sake of when Tassie have had trouble scoring, and teams that Ben Ayre have been on that have had trouble scoring, there's no one who's sitting on the bench more enjoying that moment where, okay, we can't put the ball in the basket. He's just waiting for his number to be called because he's going to go out there and the fans are going to love him and he's going to excite it. And one thing he does, he brings contagious energy. So once he knocks down a couple of shots, the next guy does, and all of a sudden the Jack Jumpers start to roll again on their offense.
So 2 things. The Jack Jumpers were a top 3 defense this past season, and usually you're a top 3 defense, you're a shoo-in for the playoffs. They were the worst offense in the league, and that's what killed them. I look at Ben Air to the Jack Jumpers similar to Isaac White on that team a few seasons ago, where they have this solid foundation defensively because they're a Scott Rock team, they're going to. But just having that extra creator, that extra ball carrier, someone who can just go create something out of nothing. Like you said, it's contagious. It can lift everyone up, and I think that's what Ben Air brings.
And I think even when McDonald is healthy, you can play Air and McDonald together. They're both flexible, and Ben Air can play a small too.
It is very small, isn't it? Yeah.
But McDonald,
bigger,
exactly.
Yeah.
And McDonald can guard up, I believe, and I just think that allows a lot of flexibility. But you're going to make up for that with their three-point proficiency, because keep in mind, Doyle and Crawford were low efficiency players, high usage, low efficiency. If you just lift your efficiencies a little bit, it's going to help those offensive struggles that we talked about.
We will get more to Tasmania a little bit later on. Josh Bannon is a name that's been discussed a lot in terms of linking up with the Jack Jumpers, so we'll explore their contract situation a little bit later on in the show. Mick Randall from News Corp reporting this morning that Kyle Bowen set to re-sign at Melbourne United. Pete? Yes, no, like the look of this?
No, I do, and I think Kyle Bowen, for the fans especially, he grew on them throughout this season. I mean, we know what happened with Jack White in the playoffs and struggling to shoot the ball from the free throw line. But again, you talk about ultimate trust guys. That's what you want on your bench. You want the ultimate trust guys that whoever the coach is, and this is Dean Vickerman in particular, is just turning around and saying, I trust that guy to go out there and just not make mistakes and be really solid. And Kyle Bowen proved that he can do that. He also had some big games. He's not going to be a guy you roll the ball to and say, hey, go and get a bucket. He's going to get dump-offs, he's going to set good screens, he's going to defend at a high level, he's going to rebound at a high level. And he's one of those grunt guys as well. So it's a good thing, because I know that Melbourne United were looking at potential backup power forwards. There's a couple on the market. But you keep someone who you know what you're getting is going to continue to get better. It's a good signing.
Well, you look at that championship series, and I thought he was decent without being good. But you saw the improvement from the series they lost against Tasmania to this one against Illawarra. He was better in this past series. And I think the fact that he gives you great effort, he's a Vickerman guy. He's a Vickerman profile player. And with that type of body and with the scarcity now that exists in the NBL for trying to find bigs, you can't let a guy like that go.
Yeah, Kyle fell into that sort of Mason Peatling mold that every Dean Vickerman team has. I thought he was really good defensively over this past season, especially throughout the playoffs. He's someone who, I say this so respectfully, his floor is always like a 6 out of 10. That's his floor. And his ceiling is maybe a 7 out of 10. But that's really nice, just to have that stability. You know what you're going to get.
He used that line at dinner last night, by the way.
You two had dinner last night?
Yeah,
what was this, a production meeting or something, was it?
It was my shout too, as always.
Your phone...
Hang on.
Your phone work?
You pay?
Yeah, he paid.
You're a joke.
Yeah. So look, the floor is really high with Kyle Bowen. The ceiling might not be a 10 out of 10, but that's fine, because it's just nice to have role players who you know exactly what you're going to get from them.
There's a spot in this league for Kyle Bowen. And
sure.
There's a spot in a Dean Vickerman coach team for a guy like Kyle Bowen, because he always wants rebounding.
The other one, again, around that backup power forward or power forward with Josh Bannon was floating around as potential. Dean Vickerman loves what Josh Bannon can bring. So, again, that would have been a higher pay. You would have to pay for Josh Bannon a lot more than Kyle Bowen for what you're getting, for what he comes as a cost. I think he's the perfect piece for them. And again, as I said, you can't understate the importance of trust guys. The Hawks proved that as well. Justin Tatum turns around, and any one of those 5 on the bench, he has full trust in. You look around the rest of the teams this league in this season from the league, and not everybody can just grab 4 to 5 guys and say, hey, in big moments, I trust you. Kyle Bowen's a trust guy.
Question coming through via social media. A reminder as well, jump on the NBL's Instagram feed in particular. You can leave a little comment there or a question for us, and we'll work our way through it across the morning. This one from Connor, who's asking the panel here, what's next for Melbourne United? Do we think they're going to get another superstar like a Chris Goulding, and will they have a look at a decent centre?
Yes. So, firstly, the Delhi domino has to fall first. They are still in the sweepstakes for Delhi. It doesn't feel like that's where it's headed, but they're still in the sweepstakes. So if they keep Delhi, then that's a marquee player there, marquee player in Chris Goulding. And then we still have to see what Jack White does next season. We'll see how his trial run in Europe goes this season first, and what he does next season. They're in the JLA sweepstakes. They're a team that is interested in Joe Luala-Chua Jr. Whether he returns is a different story. He will have high-level offers in Europe.
Is anyone else interested in Joe Luala-Chua?
The Perth Wildcats have also shown interest. Now, the Wildcats showed interest. Sorry, Connor, this is a tangent. The Wildcats showed interest in...
He can do that sometimes.
The Wildcats showed interest in JLA in the middle of last season. This past season, in the middle of the season, they gauged the prospect of bringing him in. They, of course, would have to have cut a player to do that. And so, again, the Wildcats not scared about spending, but they're a team that has shown interest in JLA in the past. So Melbourne is interested in JLA, and then I think United is still determining internally what direction they go down. Is if we don't get these locals, are we going back to multiple imports? It's something they haven't done over the past few seasons, but it's something I think they might gauge again.
Well, I think they got to get younger in the backcourt, and I think in Game 5 we saw what happened to their legs with 4 guards over the age of 30. I thought the series really wore on them, and they just didn't have the pop. We saw Delhi was basically non-productive in Game 5. So if Delhi were to leave, that opens a possibility that you can go out and get a younger import guard and someone who's really dynamic, who can defend. Obviously, that would probably push Ian Clark out the door, which I hate to see because he is such a class player. He's done so much for that program. But Pete, I thought the defensive foundation started to show cracks throughout the season, and then ultimately in Game 5 it just fell apart.
For sure, and again, they'll take a lot of learnings out of that because, yes, they have been, and it sounded harsh when I said it on overtime, but they've been to the Championship Series 2 years in a row, but unfortunately they had nothing to show for it. Because only one team can really say they had a successful year, and it's the team that wins a championship. So what gets them over the line? And again, the Delhi domino is huge. As you said, Melbourne United are still in with a chance to bring Delhi back. The more I'm hearing, the more my vibe is, I don't think it's going to happen.
It does seem that way, doesn't it?
I think Delhi's going to be on the move, which is not a bad thing for what he wants, multi-year deal-wise for the money. You go out there. If Delhi doesn't come back, I think you look at Ian Clark. I think you still bring back Ian Clark if you can. I know there's a mutual interest. Ian Clark wants to stay in Australia in the NBL. He's had success at Melbourne. He loves being in Melbourne. So I'd be looking at that straight away if Delhi doesn't come back. And then you go out there and get some other pieces, some superstar pieces. The JLA one's fascinating because I know when he came back from Asia a couple of seasons ago, wanted to stay in Melbourne, was like, yep, Melbourne's something New Zealand Breakers potentially popped up at the time, but he was very keen on staying in Melbourne. I think it's safe to say that the offers out there, with everything we talked about Perth financial flexibility-wise, their offer would probably be more significant than what Melbourne's would be.
Perth is willing to spend a lot of money on
players. And that's what I'm saying. So, again, I know he wants to stay in Melbourne. Do you take a little bit less to come back to Melbourne and stay there? But as we get to when we talk about the Wildcats, they need to make a splash. And they're probably going to have to at some stage. If they don't get Delhi, they're going to have to overpay for one of these marquees. They're going to have to do it.
But when we talk about the overall construction of Melbourne United, they need some interior scoring because people were overly critical, I felt, of Chris Golding's performance in that championship series. But he was in a situation where he had to get shots up. The slightest glimpse, he had to let it fly because he could read the situation. He knew they weren't getting any offensive punch from inside. They expected Jack White to provide something. He was unreliable and inconsistent. He had 2 good games in the championship series. Game 5, he was solid with 17, but they still lost. So, you know, maybe if they get more offensive punch on the interior, then it opens up Chris again in big game situations. I'm not talking about a game in December. I'm not talking about a game in February. I'm talking about championship games in March when it matters most.
If you actually go and break down the championship series against the Hawks, they lost that not having an interior offensive presence. And again, I went back and
defense.
But again, defense for sure. Olbrick was unbelievable in Game 5 especially. But you underestimate how big it is having a guy you can roll the ball to where everyone guarding Chris Golding or Ian Clark have to take a little step off because you've got to worry about digging down. You've got to worry about that post presence. I think they rolled the ball into the post 5 times in Game 5.
Yep.
2 of them went to Delhi. So that's what one of them was to Rob Lowe. It was for a handoff. Now, Rob Lowe had his moments. Marcus Lee was exceptional across the
See, I would bring Rob Lowe back.
And one of them's going to be a backup.
But in a different role. Yes, in a different role.
They need to have that interior presence where you can roll the ball to because that frees up Chris Golding. It frees up Ian Clark. It makes their job a little bit easier. I think that's ultimately what cost them a championship this year. So whatever happens with Delhi, their main priority, I think, has to be that impact-dominant centre.
Question from Max via social media as well. Olgun has reported that the Wildcats are interested in bringing Dylan Windler back. Is this dependent on their ability to acquire Delhi or a marquee import PG first before they look at re-signing Windler or a different import?
No, they're interested in bringing Windler back, notwithstanding what happens with Delhi or otherwise. They're very keen on bringing him back. They have a multi-year offer in front of him. From what I understand, nothing's been accepted yet, but Dylan Windler did enjoy his time in Perth. So I wouldn't completely rule out the possibility of that happening at some point, but Dylan Windler is someone that they want to bring back, and this is where the Perth Wildcats hunt for a marquee becomes so important. Because, Pete, we've spoken about the idea of, 2 imports for the price of Bryce, right? The idea of slotting 2 high-level guys into that Bryce money. If one of those guys is just Windler, I say just Windler, right? That's maybe understating who he is as a player.
For sure.
Is you have Windler, Doolittle, and then you have room for one more import. So you're not going to get two high level. You're not going to get two like all NBL first team Milton Doyles in that.
So
spot.
they really got to land the plane on that import. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they need to land at least one marquee because otherwise they're just a team that will have three really good imports and then a bunch of middling local players. And this past season, I know a lot of people had criticism for Keanu Pinder, but you'd rather Keanu Pinder in that spot than just a regular power forward or center or big man who's going to give you 7 points a game. So that's why having a marquee is so important for that team, and why even the Cairns Taipans are ahead of the Perth Wildcats right now because they have Sam Wardenberg, a marquee level player.
Spot on with the marquee, right? They can guide. I love Windler. I think Windler, what we showed when he was healthy, can be a dominant force. And again, Christian Doolittle figured it out from the season prior to the next season. Everyone takes a little bit of adjusting. Some imports come in, takes a little bit longer than others. But Windler figured out towards the back end of the year, yes, I'm an elite defender, but nobody can box me out. I've got the longest wingspan in my position. I can shoot the ball at a very high rate, and I can be a bit more aggressive offensively. So now he's in that mindset. You lock him in. Doolittle's already in the mindset that no one can guard him. And I think he proved that, especially in game 3.
And I think we'll see more of that next year,
We'll see more
won't
of
we?
that. They're going to take more offensive responsibility. Again, we talk about financial flexibility. John Riley's got offensive flexibility to be able to run a whole lot of new stuff to cater for the offensive talent they have. But Olgun's spot on. They have to go out there. If you get Windler, say they lock in Windler, you can go and get another very high-level import, but all of that can be undone if you don't go and land a marquee. They absolutely have to go and have a marquee because then you've got 4 guys you build around with local talent and you're in a great position. But it's going to be interesting to watch.
So just to try and help everyone colour in or connect the dots, I should say, in terms of Perth's contract situation, we're about to have a look at those that are under contract and those who are out of contract. And it will help paint the picture, I think, Olgun, of how important, here it is right now on screen, how important these next decisions are.
Well, so if you look at it, they're not getting Ty Webster back. I think there's a high chance they don't get Ben Henschel back. There are college offers on the table for Ben Henschel, and the number is off the charts. And so I don't think they get him back. And so let's say they don't get Matthew Dellavedova, and let's say Will McDowell-White is not available for them, which I don't think it will be. Then you have this situation where, all right, you go get an import point guard. Who starts at the 2? Let's say they bring Dylan Windler back. You have import point guard, Windler at the 3, Doolittle at the 4. Who starts at the 5? What talent is out there that's going to start at the 2 and 5 theoretically? That's going to make this a championship team, and then whoever they are, who's coming off the bench for this team? This is a team that has to fill out their roster in a significant way. But unless they land the marquee talent, I don't think the local talent is good enough to supplement.
So what's more important, if they had to really make a splash with one, what's more important, the 5 or the 1?
Well, I look at that and the way Olgun has just broken it down. Delhi becomes even more of a priority, in my opinion. You got to give him exactly what he wants, because once you get him, now you can change things up a little bit. Maybe you could go get a Keandre Cook and put him in the 2, and your roster looks really good. You go Dellavedova, Cook, Windler, Doolittle, and now you've got a strong-looking.
Or you get a high-level import 5.
That way, and then you try. But I still think you need some dynamic scoring in the backcourt to go with Delhi.
This is the hard thing about the domino of Delhi, though, right?
Yeah.
You put all your eggs in that basket. How long do you wait? You're figuring out. Do we have a timeline, do you think, when Delhi's going to be done?
My understanding was that it'd be over the weekend.
Right.
Oh.
So that helps everybody, though.
So you're saying we need to be available Monday?
If you pay me, then I'll be.
If you pay me.
Well, apparently he's
Give
buying
back to the
dinners.
community. Do something for the fans, Olgun.
Why this is a community? I'm going to dinner.
Yeah, so exactly, you're right. So if you don't get Delhi, then you kind of change. If you get Delhi, then you're putting all your eggs in that import 5 basket to go and get a big splash. But if they don't get Delhi, then maybe they have to turn their attention very quickly to getting JLA in that market, because there are going to be some imports, both well-known, who have been here previously, and go out and spend some money on some new ones. You can bring in point guards. I don't want to say import point guards are not hard to find. The right one for complementing the pieces
The right one is the right
key.
one.
But again, that domino of Delhi it's everything for Perth.
And the Delhi thing is interesting, and I know we'll expand on him more, but you look at the 2 teams who I think are the front runners, which are the Perth Wildcats and the Sydney Kings. The Sydney Kings really, really want Delhi, obviously, but I don't think they're sweating on the decision as much as the Wildcats are, because the Sydney Kings have 2 marquees already.
Yep.
And so they can just go put 3 imports or two imports around them. I think they're going to go for 2 high-level imports and then maybe 1 lower-paid one, but they're okay. They've got their marquees already. If the Wildcats don't get Delhi, then they've got to try to give what a Godfather offer to Will McDowell-White. I'm not even sure he takes that this season. And so if they don't do that, then you have to think about who is out there at a marquee level who can fill all these spots.
This is what I said about having to overpay when you get to those positions. I know they have money, but in terms of they're not trying to go backwards right now. The Perth Wildcats. I know you've lost Bryce Cotton, but you've now got money. You don't want to potentially spend the same amount as spending a whole lot of money. We know the last 2 seasons you reported how much money they've had to spend because you can't marquee Bryce Cotton's number.
They led the league in cash spend again this season.
Well,
Which is not
they're not an organisation that goes backwards, are they?
No,
they're
for sure.
always around the
But
mark.
And that's a good thing. That's
Yeah.
high expectations.
If the Delhi thing doesn't come off, then maybe you actually go down the path of, you know what, Will McDowell, what is it going to take? You tell us what it's going to take. How absurd is it? Let's start there and go from. You need to have that kind of piece. It has to be a marquee. And we talk about the impact marquees out there that fit what Perth Wildcats are building. It's the JLAs, Delhi, the Will McDowell Whites. There's not a heap others out there.
But let's look at Delhi, okay, because we've talked about basically 4 teams. Brisbane, Sydney, Perth, Melbourne. If I'm looking at the basketball fit, I think number 1 is Sydney, then Perth, then Melbourne, then Brisbane.
Well,
That's how I prioritize it.
We haven't
That's how I
even spoke about
prioritize
Brisbane
it.
as an option. It seems like that's fallen apart a little bit.
Who knows? We don't know what's going on there. Maybe Delhi was behind. Maybe he had some idea that Stu Lash was going to be named coach. Maybe there was.
We'll
we
get
don't
to that
know.
in a moment.
You know what I mean? We don't know.
We'll get to the Brisbane Bullets very shortly. One more fan question. Reminder as well, NBL social media platforms on Instagram stories. You can leave your questions for us and we'll get to them very soon. This one from Mark S. Would you consider bringing Antonius Cleveland or Robert Franks back to the NBL? If so, what team would be the best fit? Now, for those who are playing along on social media, Antonius Cleveland may have dunk of the year in where he's playing overseas right now. Thunderous dunk in the last 24 hours. Pete, to you first. Antonius Cleveland seems like a name that comes up every single year because he's perfect in so many areas for this league.
Well, and again, he obviously has the thinking that he wants to come back to the NBL. He's always spoken about potentially wanting to return. Anyone who's been here and has success, he had success here, it becomes a potential option for teams, right? So I'm always looking at it. If you can get it done, he's a really, really good complementary import. And that's probably understating it. He's a dominant player. He understood when he was here the second time around, understood what it took to unlock the offensive end. Extremely good defender, but understood where he could thrive in the offensive end. And all of a sudden that becomes a top. I'm looking at Antonius Cleveland before I'm looking at Robert Franks for what we know wins here in the NBL.
And I didn't love Franks' last stint in Adelaide. I didn't think that was really impressive. It was very underwhelming. And I just think Cleveland is a guy that looks like he's kept his game to the level that could transfer back to the NBL. And as we mentioned, like now he could play a really good 4 spot in the NBL as well as having the flexibility to play the 3. And in particular defensively, this guy was an elite defender. And he could pretty much guard 1 through 4. But, you know, again, what team does he fit with? Where do you slot him in?
So there are 2 teams who are looking for that sort of player, an Antonius Cleveland type.
Yep.
And it's the Adelaide 36ers. They want a 4-man who can stretch the floor a bit. He showed over the past few seasons that he can do that. Still not a high-level 3-point shooter, but he's not a non-shooter. And he can push the pace. That's what they want. And then the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, assuming that Matt Hurd is off the table, which it's sounding more and more like he won't be available for the Phoenix next season. Antonius Cleveland is very much a Josh King type of player, a defense-first guy, someone who wants to run a lot. That feels like the sort of player that they'll be going after.
And the power forward.
Antonius Cleveland is a 4-man in the
3-man squad
in 2025.
Fascinating. Well, I mean, I'm interested to see.
You don't agree?
Well, I mean, you talk about being able to pick and pop. What Matt Hurt brought the league and what he does. Again, defensively, he's one of the best defenders in the league. But he matches up alongside like a Xavier Cooks type. That goes really well. You're not going to roll the ball into him and say, go and get a bucket. You have the flexibility to play him in numerous positions. And again, it'd be interesting. Adelaide's popped up a couple of times since he left about wanting to go after and get him. I think you could do a whole lot worse in that regard. But
yeah, I agree.
I'm still picking up the phone. What's it going to take to make it happen? These imports who have been here and understand, one, how the league is played, but how everything else operates, you can't understate that value. That is huge when you come in with another level of confidence and understanding and what you can bring.
Also, what usually happens is an import comes here, plays at a really high level, then they get priced out of the NBL. They go to Europe or China or whatever. And then they realize that Australia is probably the most palatable place to live in the world. And then they think about coming back. And there is a chance that we can see that with some of these imports.
More of your questions very shortly. Leave them on our social media. Our team will collate them and get to them very, very soon. We've had a WhatsApp group going for a couple of weeks here to get ready for Marketplace Live. We've been throwing around all of the different ideas and scenarios and players to talk about. One that was not on any of our bingo cards was Stu Lash coaching the Brisbane Bullets. If we're being totally honest here, we knew that the Bullets were conducting a worldwide search for the coach. We had heard a couple of names that were down to the final 5 and then down to the final 3. And then we hear the news that was quite a shock to everyone. And I don't say that in a negative way whatsoever. Just very surprising that the Brisbane Bullets have landed with Stu Lash as their head coach. How did this all play out, Olgun?
Shocking is the word, in the fact that it was very surprising. No one really saw this coming. I told some people, you can give them 1,000 guesses. They wouldn't have guessed that this is who they landed on. Basically, so here's the origin story of this. They began their search for a new head coach. They got rid of Justin Schuller, 2 seasons with that team, didn't have a winning record either season. They moved on. There was always smoke that they might move on from him. They began their search. They had 26 candidates. They interviewed 16 of them. Ultimately, that was cut down to a top 6. At some point in the process, the ownership of the Brisbane Bullets reached out to Mal Watts, the CEO, and said, what about Stu Lash as a potential option? Now, Stu Lash has experience in NBA front offices. He was on the Denver Nuggets coaching staff for a short amount of time. So he has experience around world basketball. This was broached to Stu Lash, and Lash thought about it for a few days and then came back and said, this is something I'm interested in. So at that point, Lash, who was the senior basketball advisor, effectively the GM, they took him off the selection panel, made him a candidate. He interviewed like everyone else, and it got to a point where he was in the top 6 and down to the top 2, and ultimately was handed this position. Now, some of the other names that we know were involved in this, I'm told Paulie Henare was part of the top 6. He was one of the finalists. Another name that was brought up to me that interviewed was David Gomez, someone who is coaching in Japan right now. Randy Livingston is someone who that people in Australia might know, was coaching high school basketball out in Louisiana over the last couple of years, former NBA player. He's someone who they were interested as well at some point, but Stu Lash is someone who comes in, no head coach experience.
That's big.
And for a team that has not made the postseason in almost 10 years and who haven't had a coach with head coach experience for the past couple of years, you assume that was something that they would be chasing, but they're not doing that. They're going down that, Justin Tatum, that Petteri Koppinen, that unorthodox path. It's a risk. It's a gamble. It's a bit rogue. We'll see if it works, but you understand the thinking, but it is a giant gamble for this team.
From where they were in terms of Justin Schuller was a first-time coach, I think the surprise here, Pete and Derek, is that they have gone for the gamble option, that they had what I think we all consider a safe bet in Paulie Henare, a proven coach coaching in Japan right now, as one of a number of options that were safer bets. This could go really, really well. And we could be sitting here in 12 months from now, the Bullets make the playoffs and we say, great call. It could also not go so well, and we could be sitting here in 12 months from now saying, what were they thinking?
Hindsight's a beautiful thing. So again, we can't judge this until we see the results. We see what happens on, 1, the free agency period, what kind of players they can attract and recruit and build the roster on. And 2, by Christmas, how's it look? If it looks really good, you're right. You're saying it's a master hire from someone who's been within the organisation, understands the direction they're going. Shocked is the right word for me, though. The no head coaching experience is the one that, when you parted ways with Schuller, I think everybody expected, we talked about it, they're going to go for a big fish. They're going to land a big fish. That's what they need to do. That's why they're getting rid of Justin Schuller. Paulie Henare is someone I've been talking about for the last couple of seasons. Of how do you get guys back? How do you get coaches and players back from Japan? The thought of having that opportunity to do that, I thought would have been a no-brainer. But yeah, the no head coaching experience is what is a shock to me in regards of how it all came about because of the timing of it. We all sat here and we kept hearing all these names. Chase Buford was interested in the role, I believe, from what Olgun was reporting. So all these other names were popping up and you thought, okay, this makes sense. This is why they've got rid of Justin Schuller. They're going out there to make a big splash. And again, you can't judge any of it until you see the results, which is the beautiful part of hiring both players, signing players and coaches, because all of that, all the answers are going to be in the results to see what happens going forward. It can work out as a masterstroke. Having someone involved in the organisation who's been there for the last 2 years, and as Jack said, it has the potential to go the other way. We'll find out soon enough.
Shocking, again, is the correct word. And one of the reasons is because the messaging throughout the process was we want someone that has previous head coaching experience. Okay, so they contravened that messaging in the ultimate hire. The other thing is, Pete, why are the Bullets bad? They're bad because they can't defend. 2 years ago, 8th in the league in defensive rating. Last year, they finished last in the competition in defensive rating. Is Stu Lash capable of turning that around? Because if he can't address their defensive woes, this is going to go bad.
Yeah, another reason why this shocked people around sort of Australian basketball and sort of the world basketball ecosystem was because of the fact that they did flag to agents of coaches and things like that they were looking for someone with head coach experience. And so then to sort of pivot and hire Stu Lash, I think that took a lot of people by surprise. Again, we had never seen Stu Lash coach before. So theoretically, we can reserve judgment until that happens.
Yeah.
But this is, it's a Bullets team that has made the postseason once since they returned to the NBL. They had Andre Lamanis for that first couple of seasons, for the first 4 or 5 seasons. That's Boomer's head coach. That's who that was. Since then, it's been James Duncan, and then that ultimately turned into Greg Vanderjack, Sam McKinnon, that debacle of a season, and then into Justin Schuler, someone else with no head coach experience. Now into Stu Lash, someone else with no head coach experience. So again, that's why this is an unbelievable gamble, because it's sort of more of the same. And people point to Justin Tatum and Petteri Koppinen as sort of like-for-like things, but those guys played at a reasonable level, Petteri Koppinen especially. So those are their former players as well. So that's where it slightly differs from those guys. But I think people are seeing the success of especially Justin Tatum and thinking, we can make an unorthodox pick, and if we just get a good leader, then this can work. That's
I
like
don't
the
like
thinking.
that though. That scares me, because what Justin Tatum did to the Hawks.
He's a one of one, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We haven't. It's not like we've seen this twice in the last decade.
He's
This
also
is
probably got the best assistant coaching staff in the league
Correct.
too, with Joel Carlu, Sam Grugg.
And they had the continuity of players rolling over. So everything was there. I mean, what they did last season was phenomenal under Justin Tatum, and we're all talking about he could have won Coach of the Year last season. It was an outstanding turnaround. He brought back 90% of the roster, added a couple of key pieces. It's a very unique thing, and I'm hoping that's not what it came down to. Like, hey, Justin Tatum did this, we can do this. Petteri Koppinen, I hope that's not what weighed more than, hey, we've got head coaching experience available, because that's probably not the way you want to make a decision. But again, we can't judge any of this until we see the results, we see the players they put on. Again, we're all going to be fascinated to watch now. Again, it could work out really well. We know Stu Lash very well, great basketball mind. So now's the opportunity to go in there and make something happen.
And we wish him all the best, as you say, Pete. We've all had a lot to do with Stu. Really good guy, loves the league, loves the Bullets. So we wish him all the best in the role. I don't want to be the negative Nelly here, Derek, and this is personal for you with the Brisbane Bullets, but if I'm a Bullets fan, after everything that you have all just articulated, I'm sitting there thinking, this better work. There's no other way to boil it down than that. This better work.
My phone was on fire yesterday, and unfortunately for the Bullets,
That's
most of it was not positive. And I was a bit measured in my responses to people and just telling them, just sit tight, we don't know. We don't know what Stu Lash is capable of as a coach. But I will say, through my history here, this type of situation generally does not work out. Now, he's got a huge challenge in front of him. And the number one thing that I believe he's going to have to establish is a voice of command. Can he lead that team? Can he lead that group of men? Because that has been problematic since Andre Lamanis left. The coach has not been able to hold on to the locker room, create game plans, and have them executed. I'm in those Bullets timeouts on a regular basis. I see guys rolling their eyes. I see the reactions. And as we look at their, they've got a decent roster, Olgun. You look at the talent, but there's a lot of fragility in the roster. Guys just don't stay healthy. And if you look through the guys that are in, most of them missed, the better part of the second half of the season, except Casey Prather.
They've got to go and get some big pieces, though, for sure.
Well, Delhi is the one. Again, we keep mentioning Delhi, but if they can get Dellavedova, by the way, I'm giving Delhi anything he wants.
It doesn't seem like Brisbane's that big of an option for Delhi, or it hasn't been reported as it is.
I mean, he visited them.
I'm wondering now, though, if the Stu Lash signing becomes a little bit more enticing for a guy like Delhi, though, who has the professionalism, with the club as well, willing to probably give a little bit more. You've got no head coaching experience with Stu Lash coming in.
You get to run it a little bit more. You get more autonomy.
You get to shape everything that goes on.
Captain coach type scenarios.
But again, you talked about this. If they get Delhi for once his career's done, then you keep him in the Brisbane Bullets in whatever aspect going forward. That can become very enticing. And I'm wondering if now, okay, whatever the number was we had, we'll give you a little bit more than that. Like, we are really big. That would change the landscape of this completely.
And keep in mind, his good friend Mitch Young lives in Brisbane. He runs the Logan Thunder.
Yep.
And those guys are very close. I don't know. I'm not saying it impacts Delhi's decision, but there are some variables there that would make Delhi think this decision through.
So you know Delhi. We've all dealt with Delhi before. Is he the type of person who would go and do that, go from Dean Vickerman to a first-time head coach, and think, oh, I get to run the show? Or do you think his preference would be to go somewhere that's a bit more proven?
You know what the problem is,
What's
Olgun?
his preference?
You miss championship competition. You go to Brisbane, you're not playing championship basketball.
The other side of that is what I think and what we understand from Delhi. I think it is a little bit enticing, though, to go there and be like, hey, like, he knows who he is. And he understands that if you're not with him for the ride, then he doesn't want you as part of the team. Like, Delhi is the utmost professional. He competes harder than anybody, wears his heart on his sleeve every single day, does all the right things. If he's going to go to the Brisbane Bullets, he's setting that tone from the jump. So everyone else has to come along for the ride. We talk about the big domino, but now with everything else that's going on in the Brisbane Bullets, it can be a really nice thing of like, hey, this is where I'm at now. His goal is to make the Olympics in 2028. So I'm going to continue to play at a high level. I think it does become a little bit more enticing. The championship thing is key. He wants to compete and wants to win a championship. So maybe that's where it comes down for the Bullets right now. If you're saying that a decision might be made by the end of the weekend, it's, hey, Delhi, if we can lock you in, we're going to go out and get these type of pieces to complement you. And all of a sudden, we're in a championship fight. We've got Casey Prather, we've got Tyler Harrison, we've got pieces to help that. It can be very enticing.
One piece that they won't have, Olgun, is Josh Bannon. So we saw the graphic just before on their contract situation. Josh Bannon had a player option, chose not to take it, and chose to explore. So the Bullets made a pretty heavy investment in Josh Bannon out of college to be their foreman for a long time to come. After 2 years and some issues with durability, 19 games in both seasons, Josh Bannon looks to be on the move.
He does, and he is in deep talks with the Jack Jumpers. From what I understand, at this point in time, no deal is done, but there's been mutual interest between those two parties for a while now. So that is a deal that I expect to get done probably in the coming days. But as of now, it's not done, but they're a team that has just been strongly interested in him. He's someone who I think can slot in there. And when we talk about what the Jack Jumpers can bring from an import perspective, you know, we mentioned Keandre Cook just as like the play style he brings. Imagine them, you know, being the worst offensive team in the league, going and getting two wings, Milton Doyle and another high-level wing. That'd be really cool if you have Josh Bannon there to start. Again, assuming the durability holds up with Bannon and Will Magnay, that is a really cool local front court that this Jack Jumpers team could lean on, assuming this gets done, which I assume it will.
And Jack, let's talk about that durability, because I'm going to just hold off on that, knowing the problems that the Bullets evidently had with their medical crew and the external review that went on, and now the hiring of a new sports science director. So let's give Bannon a moment to get outside that old Bullets regime and see what he does at Tasmania. Maybe that was the issue why he was not durable.
Well, again, I'm not upset with him for declining a player option for that understanding of like, hey, he might have heard whispers of, hey, we're going to part ways with the coach. Before I lock in, let's see what's going on here. Let's see the lay of the land. And I know the Jack Jumpers, they're the ones that I've been hearing as well. They're very interested. They seem like that's going to be the best fit for him, both sides. How long it takes to get that deal done, what the terms of that deal looks like will be interesting. But that's also another place that you can see, okay, you know what, Josh Bannon, that's kind of a good culture. Again, a really nice trust piece, but also someone we haven't seen the ceiling yet. Like, we've seen glimpses of it when he's healthy, but we understand that he can be a lot more when he stays on the court and when he delivers in a better offense.
And the other thing is, sometimes where you play can impact how you perform, and I think there would be a lot of love from the Tasmania fan base for Josh Bannon, and in turn, he performed better. And look, he is a quality player. Let's not let his past season's performance cloud the actual judgment on what he's able to do. This is a guy who I thought potentially could have been a captain of the Brisbane Bullets.
Well, if he lands at Tasmania, which all roads seem to lead towards Josh Bannon playing in the Apple Isle next season, their roster situation with some questions around Jordan Crawford and Milton Doyle, Olgun, but from a local perspective, Magnay McDonald, who was injury interrupted last season, Majuk Deng, Drimmick, Ben Eyre as a new signing that we've spoken about this morning, and some depth in the guard positions. That's a pretty reasonable starting point.
It is, because you have, at least what I understand, their starting point guard in Sean McDonald and a starting centre in Will Magnay. That's a really good starting point. And then Milton Doyle is someone who there is mutual interest in bringing him back. You know, Pete and I have spoken about this, that they effectively see him as a local. They want to keep him as part of the franchise. So right there, you have three starters. Let's say Anthony Drimmick continues to start. There is a really good basis there. Josh Bannon would potentially join that crew. You know, you look at the bench, it's just filling out what they do there, you know, who they could potentially get. I don't expect Fabian Krislovic back. I don't expect Ruben Tarangi back. Clint Stein will retired, of course. But there is there's a foundation of a really good team there. And again, with Scott Roth at the helm, you know, at the very least, we know they're going to be a high-level defensive team. they run good stuff offensively. Last season, they just didn't have the bodies. They just didn't have the juice. It feels like this season, assuming everyone stays healthy, and especially Sean McDonald, because Milton Doyle's numbers were a different story when Sean McDonald was on the floor compared to when he was.
So were Tasmanians as a team. When Sean McDonald played, they won.
100%. So assuming he's healthy all season, which we're going to hope so, then they have the foundation, the crux of a really good team.
They went on an 8-game winning streak, right, when they started to get some health. And again, it's hindsight with geniuses, but Scott Roth said that Sean McDonald was supposed to be the starting point guard from the jump last season. Now, I know they had the Singapore trip, that's where he got hurt, but think about what could have been. I know they don't make the finals. I know that you don't want to say it was a failure of a season, but they had to go through so much adversity. If you start Sean McDonald, he's proven now to be that perfect piece that can bring everybody together. You get Milton Doyle done. As I said, I think that the best of Milton Doyle is, we know, capable, all NBL first teamer. He can carry a team. With Bryce Cotton gone, I know Tyler Harvey's still there, but now he's probably a top 2 clutch player in the league. So you've got that there with Milton Doyle. I'm probably going out to make a big splash in the 3. I think Anthony Drimmick's a great piece to bring back. Bannon, yep, understand that. Will Magnay, one of the best big men in the league, the best big defender in the league for sure. They're in a really good spot, but I'd go out to nail that piece from there. And then Kristovic, you're right, I've heard him linked to other teams. I don't think he'll be back.
A lot of the questions that have come through via social media in the lead up to today's show, there were a lot of questions around Flynn Cameron. He seems to be, Olgun, in the eyes of fans, one of the best available young guards in the league right now.
He's another one of the dominoes. Like he's someone who half the league is showing a ton of interest in, and there are teams that are preparing to start him. They saw the way he played under Dean Vickerman at Melbourne United. They felt he was underused, and you get it. There was some youth there, and Melbourne United was pretty stacked in those guard spots. But he's someone who multiple teams are interested in. From what I'm told, if I get on my list, I'm told Sydney, Adelaide, a return to Melbourne's not off the cards. New Zealand and Brisbane. These are teams that are all interested in Flynn Cameron. Some see him as a potential high-level guard. Some see him as a wing player, but he has a lot of options on the table, and he'll make a decision probably within the next week. But there's no front runner at this point. You've got Adelaide that wants to give him a big role. New Zealand wants to bring him home. Brisbane wanted to bring him in when he first came out of college, came out of UC Riverside. So there's a lot of options on the table for Flynn Cameron. And once he's off the board, then I think we'll see other pieces fall.
Well, mark my words, if Flynn Cameron gets to the right team where he's given the quality minutes that I believe he deserves now, he's going to be a front runner for most improved player. And there's a guy who's going to average double figures. We've seen what he can do in short stints. Remember, probably about a third of the way through this past season when Melbourne United were plagued with the injuries, he went on a run where he really scores the ball well. And I think he's an underrated defender. And I think as he gets more burn and learns the league a little bit more, he's got the physical capabilities and the athleticism to be a good point of attack defender.
He's a stud. He's a stud. And again, he's just been that cage dog waiting for opportunity. You can't. I know he was underused for sure, but what he got experience-wise, development-wise at Melbourne United was huge. And that'll be a big part of what he does for the rest of his career. From a New Zealand Breakers point of view, you just have to get this done.
You're big on this, aren't you?
They've gone out there, the new ownership, it's great. Everyone is super excited. I'm excited to see the Breakers. The Blackwells are back in there, Abercrombie, Boucher. It's really exciting times for New Zealand. You go out and say we want to bring back the local talent, and there's some other local talents they're talking about around the world to try and bring back. But Flynn Cameron now is a massive piece, and I don't want to say you have to pay overs to get him, but this is the start of that. This is the start of that, to lock him in for a long-term deal, build around these young superstars. But it's interesting you talk about the Brisbane Bullets, Olgun, and the fact that Paul Henare was a chance to be a coach. That would have lined up.
Well, there's a link there.
If Paul Henare, if they had signed Paul Henare as their head coach, Flynn Cameron would have been there yesterday.
And again, it's again goes back to that kind of attractiveness. But Paul Henare is one. He needs to be coaching the league sooner rather than later. He's a phenomenal coach to be able to bring him back. But I'm big on, for the New Zealand Breakers, of being so vocal about bringing back local talent, where they want to get to. They've got to make sure they can get whatever Flynn Cameron wants. And I know there's probably going to be some other larger roles around. People are willing to offer that, understandably so. But from a local point of view, for everything that's gone on headline-wise, got to get it done.
Let's talk about Adelaide, though, as an option. Because we know Adelaide, they're willing to give Flynn Cameron a starting spot, or at least to start a season, as their sort of Sunday Detch, like Mayan replacement, starting at the 3. Now, that's like not traditionally the position we've seen Flynn Cameron play in. But they're willing to start Flynn Cameron at the 3. He can be the sort of 3-and-D guy. Obviously, an extra ball carrier out there as well. Mike Wells, from what I'm told, is flying to Auckland right now to meet with Flynn Cameron. They're trying to get this done because they see him as someone who can play a significant part of their team. And so other teams are out there willing to offer big roles. Adelaide is a money that has shown over the past few seasons and this season that they're not against spending up on players, right? And so that is a team that I would look at with him. Again, I don't know if he ends up choosing that, but there is a big offer from a role perspective on the table for him.
Cameron, Vasiljevic, Humphreys, import 3-4 for Adelaide. Is that what we're thinking?
Import 1-4.
Import 1 and 4.
Sorry,
he's not your true small forward. He's not a three-man, but he can play that.
Three,
and
yeah, sure.
And you talk about another point guard or have another ball handler. That's for sure. But again, from the New Zealand Breakers, he's got to be a starting role as well to kind of move into other pieces. He's probably more of a 2 with a backup 1 as well.
Well,
I understand what the Adelaide 36ers are trying to achieve in doing that because the uncapped potential is there.
Yeah,
Getting him in the door is
let's look the other way, though. Where does he fit best?
Well, let me pose this question. This is from Taylor via social media as well. A question for you, Derek. If it's the Taylor that I'm thinking of, who's the New Zealand Breakers fan, then...
No, he changed.
Did he really?
He changed to Perth last season.
Oh, okay. Well, he might jump back on after this. Taylor asks, with the new Kiwi ownership at the Breakers, will they take a Kiwi local approach in free agency? Flynn Cameron, Yanni Wetzel, Finn Delaney, etc.
Well, I'm hearing that Wetzel is off the table. I don't know. Olgun probably have more info on that. But obviously, as we just discussed, like Flynn Cameron would be a great signing for them for the reasons we just outlined. Now, Finn Delaney, I didn't love how he looked the last time he was in the league. I thought he looked a bit cumbersome. I didn't think he played with the fluidity that we had seen previously. I thought his offensive development wasn't up to scratch, but that could have just been a bad season. The bottom line is he's still a great body. He's a local. Can you get him back or not from where he is? I'm not sure.
I don't think so. As of right now, the intel suggests that Finn Delaney will stay in Europe next season. With regard to the Breakers, yes, they've made it public. They have not had any sort of... They haven't been shy about shouting it from the rooftops. They want Kiwi players. And so that means, someone like, again, Flynn Cameron is of interest. Someone like Isaiah Liafa, there is a potential landing spot there. Ruben Tarangi is someone who they've reached out about. So they want Kiwi players.
It's like a national team.
Well, I don't, but the problem is I don't know if they're going to be able to get the high-level ones. They've got Sam Menenga, which is great, but they couldn't get Sam Wardenberg. Sam Wardenberg wanted to stay in Cairns for another season. But there are options to bring in a lot of Kiwi role players, which it looks like they're trying to do.
It doesn't seem like they're going to be able to get Liafa and Cameron based on that, though, to fill, because you've still got McCarron, you've still got Bairstow, you've got guards that are already there. Yeah. So that's going to be the interesting thing to kind of weigh up with all of that. The Wetzel one, I know I reported, I said that they were being open to wanting to come back. The offer has to be very significant. And I know that numerous teams have reached out about Yanni Wetzel's availability. The number is very high. The number is very high, understandably so. Just had one of his best games. He's having his best year in Europe. But the fact that they are open to wanting to come back, it's going to have to cost money. But the good players always do. The marquee, the big dominant dominoes always cost money. Who's willing to spend that? I don't see it being this season. But hopefully sooner or later.
But he feels like Yanni Wetzel, Derek, feels like with the New Zealand movement to get their culture and the identity back, he feels like the perfect sort of cherry on top.
And let's talk about the economics of the league right now. This may be the season when you splurge on a big. It could reward you with a championship.
That's true.
If everyone else is deficient in the position, you splurge this season and go, you know what, we don't want to do this, but this might get us to the promised land. This is the season. Strike now, get after it with the big if you have interest from that big.
Yeah, there will be value in being one of those teams that can lure one of these high-level players back from Europe or from Asia. You have to be one of those teams, again, because marquees is what carries you. Sam Froling was one of the people who carried the Illawarra Hawks throughout their entire season. United was carried by their marquees. The season before that, it was United carried by their marquees. It was the Jack Jumpers carried by Jack McVeigh and Will Magnay. This is how this league works. If you don't have high-level marquees, it's very tough to compete.
And the whole beauty of the salary cap and having the marquee player rule is that you can pay them whatever they're worth, and towards the salary cap, it just means one number. Like that's you've just got to be willing to understand.
Xavier Cooks made $1 million last season. He costs at the most $250,000
as a marquee. That's why we want it. We talk about all the money around the rest of the world. It's the great thing about the salary cap. It's a soft cap for a reason. Where to get that big talent, if you have the ability to spend it, you're going to have to do it. Now, when Yanni Wetzel went to Europe, Was he a marquee before that when he was signing here?
No, he wouldn't have been.
Now he is, and now he's an absolute stud. He was a stud then. I think he averaged 17 and 8 the last season before he left. Would have been a marquee had he stayed here, but now he's a really high level. And you talk about the bigs around the rest of the league, the lack thereof. It's going to cost you a lot, but I'll be trying to make it whatever you can to make it happen.
And let me add a corollary to what I said before.
What?
He's trying to say corollary. You go ahead.
If you have a four-man already, like a Xavier Cooks, and you're able to go out there and add a big, now you got a superpower up front. And that's why the teams that don't have a four-man of that caliber must be mindful and go out there and make these purchases.
And if you're hunting a marquee, don't let $80,000 of cash spend be the difference between your team coming 8th and 3rd. Right? There are teams who you're gonna be in the middle of a season and you're gonna be coming 8th and you're gonna have like a 10 and 18 record, and you're gonna think, man, if we just spent $50,000 more of cash, not on the cap, because that player's marqueed anyway. If we just spend that little bit more, maybe we're in 3rd place. Maybe we get some playoff games, so we get the revenue from some home games in the playoffs. Maybe we win a championship and we get revenue from that too. Like, it should you have to take these risks if you're an owner of a team in order to be a successful team.
Spoken like a future GM, I think you'll find there. Just before we move away from New Zealand, on that graphic that we showed, we had Taco Fall and his situation. You don't expect Taco Fall to return?
I do not. He's currently contracted, but I think there's a mutual understanding that he will find a different home ahead of next season.
Nick Marshall, Pete, we've touched on him a little bit already this morning. He's now 25 years of age. There are certain sections of the Australian basketball community who think that this kid could be one of the next big things here in the NBL. We've seen flashes, we've seen glimpses, we've seen him get starting opportunities, but we haven't seen the whole gamut as yet. He's looking for a fresh start.
Yeah, I mean, last season, we know what he can be. We know we've seen glimpses. The NBL won an absolute stud, but it just seemed like in the last 2 years he was destined for a change of scenery. And there are teams, I've spoke to teams who are interested in bringing in Nick Marshall and trying to unlock that potential. Now, he's probably had more opportunities than some other young guys in the similar situation. We talk about Michael Harris. Michael Harris hasn't had anywhere near the same opportunities at NBL level to play like Nick Marshall has. But now he gets a chance to go and find a different set of circumstances, a different coach, a different offense, and hopefully unlock his full potential. And I fully expect him to land on a team pretty soon.
Electric body, good length, nice athleticism, probably needs to get stronger through the hips and upper body. Hasn't really shown the ability to defend on ball well. But because of that athleticism, he's always going to get an opportunity. Someone is going to show some level of belief in him. And I think right now he gets his opportunity, but what's next for him? Has he done enough to be in someone's top 8?
So that's where it's an interesting question, because you can talk forever about, man, what a great up-and-coming player. He turns 26 this year. So at some point you become a cool prospect into just a whatever NBL player, and you have to have proven something. Now, he's proven enough that there is interest out there. The Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, the Tasmania Jackjumps, they're two teams that I know are interested in Nick Marshall. They've reached out about him, so he will be on a deal. But we are getting to a point where he's no longer in that, wow, what could this guy end up being, into maybe this is what he is.
He is what he is,
So we think it'll be a multi-year deal? That's what I'm interested in. Or is he getting one more chance? Like, hey, this is your chance. We like what you can bring. Don't give me a 2-year with a mutual, but it seems like that's what it could be.
So if I'm a GM, and I get told repeatedly I'm not, I don't know.
I mean, you're not.
It's a good reminder for you sometimes.
I would 1+1 him. I'd mutual or team the second season of that, just because I don't think he's demonstrated enough to invest more than one season into him.
Which is not harsh. It's the reality of what we've seen so far.
We still, again, we've spoken about the lack of opportunities he's had, and yes, he's had little bits and pieces, but he's never had like a consistent run of consistent minutes. So we have to see that first. He has to demonstrate it first before you invest multiple years into him.
Questions coming through from social media. There are so many of them. We're not going to get to all of them before we finish today, so we apologise in advance, but thank you so much for being involved. This one from KM. We're touching on the Taipans. We've spoken about a couple of players involved in Cairns, but a question for you, Olgun, around their coach. Who will it be, or when will we see an announcement?
So I was always told that they would go into free agency without a coach, and lo and behold, we are here in free agency and they have no coach. They are still in the process of interviewing candidates. some names have been floated about. It seems like they're interviewing a mixture of Australians and Americans and Kiwis. So they're stretching it sort of far and wide as far as the pool. One name that I did hear that they showed some interest in was Robbie McKinlay, who's currently the Centre of Excellence, their head coach. He's a high-level coach. He's been part of Boomers programs in the past. That's someone who there's been some smoke about his name, but at this point I don't know of a candidate or a top 3 or anything like that yet. I don't think they've picked a coach, but they were preparing to go into free agency without one. So that it's not like they're behind the 8 ball from their own expectations.
Feels like they could do a lot worse than Joel Carlu, whose name has been thrown around a little bit. One of the lead assistants under Justin Tatum at the Illawarra Hawks. I feel like you guys know him better than I do, but I feel like he's ready for an opportunity.
And I haven't heard that he is interviewed. I haven't heard that at all. That is just in our mind, as people who are around Australian basketball, the obvious choice if you want to go and chase a guy.
I heard Robbie's name was up there as well, so it makes sense. And again, Cairns is the most unique situation out of everything in the NBL, right? For the small market team, what they spend, where they're at, how the cycle works. Adam Ford's been talking about it, how that cycle works. So it actually doesn't hurt them to go to free agency without a coach. You don't sign the Cairns Taipans for the coach unless that coach is Adam Ford.
True.
There's a certain reason why people wanted to play for Adam Ford. So it's not like they're going to lose out on anything by not having a coach in this free agency period. Whatever they do, they start to build up with the players they've got. Getting Sam Wardenberg signed is huge. That was kind of what we were feeling throughout the course of the year, was that he'd do one more year. Obviously, a Kiwi local that's not going back to New Zealand this year. He was going to do one more year. All signs pointed towards this. That's locked in. And then Alex Higgins-Titcher, I think we've just seen the surface of how good he's going to be, dominating in the 3x3. So it's a nice little thing to build off. As I said, not having a coach in free agency for them doesn't hurt as much of another club if they didn't have one.
And Kyron Galloway coming back, and look, he showed signs early in the season. He was on fire. His true shooting percentage, I think, was like 75% through the first 7 or 8 games. So, he has talent. There's hope that he might turn into something more consistently over time. Akolda Gak is an interesting one for me. I really like him as a player. I think his athleticism, his length is appealing for a lot of clubs, especially as we've mentioned, with not many bigs out there on the market. He's a guy who went over in a G League game. I don't know how much credence you give to this, but he had a very good game.
Not too much. Continue.
Yeah, a couple. I mean, at the beginning of last season, he was very good. But again, when you're looking for young bigs, he is probably one of the best ones.
I'd like to see him in Tasmania. Okay, Gak. It's like the backup to what Will Magnay can bring. You talk
just
about
had Gorjok Gak, just replace him with his.
But to be able to have that kind of rim protection, that uncapped, again, I think he can be a stud with the right.
Even Brisbane.
It would make sense. There's a lot of teams that would make sense.
Brisbane is interested in AK Gak. Southeast Melbourne Phoenix are a team that has interest in him too. And we talk about they didn't have a backup for Geordie Hunter. So not only did they not have the depth there, but also Geordie Hunter had to play a little bit reserved and resigned because of that. Having someone like AK Gak there, who again I think fits what Josh King wants to do, which is an athletic body. I think he fits that. I know that they do like him as well.
It seems like based on the local free agents backup big wires that the Phoenix are looking at, it's that AK Gak, Fabian Krislovic type mould.
I was going to say, it seems to be down to those two.
And again, that kind of mould where a trust guy that you can throw out there. With Geordie Hunter's your marquee big man, you understand what he's going to bring to kind of support that when needed. And if you need him to play a bigger role, he can do that because you have the trust in him. So one of those two, they could do a whole lot worse with that.
Well, I think Krislovic fits perfectly if they could get him at Southeast Melbourne. When you look at that lineup, he serves that Peatling role. He serves the role that he did with Tasmania when they won the championship. And I just think he brings you a lot of character, some soul. He's willing to do whatever he takes. He's low maintenance, gives you leadership. And that type of player is invaluable in our league. But I like where the Southeast Melbourne are positioned. And I think they have just a nice balance of enough guys coming back who are local talent and then the flexibility with their imports.
Well, Matt Hurt, you spoke about earlier, Olgun. It's worth us going back to that properly. Now, for those who missed earlier, we did touch on Southeast Melbourne. About an hour ago, you mentioned that Matt Hurt was looking less likely. Incidentally, Richard Hurt, his father, is watching the show. Richard, great to see you. Commented on YouTube. He was one of the most interesting people on broadcast this season. He's commented via YouTube and said that Matt would love to come back to Southeast Melbourne. Where do things sit with him right now?
So, Matt, there is a mutual interest in him. It's just whether they can come to terms on a deal.
Sure.
And as of right now, doesn't sound like they are or they will. It just feels like that there is a market out there for Matt Hurt that is just so substantial that
overseas
that it's very difficult to see him back in Southeast Melbourne. And so, again, I think the likelihood is that the Phoenix will have 3 new imports this season compared to last season.
It makes sense. Again, the money's going to be big. He played unbelievable basketball all season long, a top 3 MVP candidate, which is big. I mean, you talk about your first year in the league, the impact that he had, he's going to be rewarded for that with a big paycheck. So, yeah, I'm unsure if it's going to be the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. Doesn't mean that he lands somewhere else. Is someone else willing to pay that kind of money? We'll see, because he's only going to get better. And now I keep talking about it. He understands the league. A second year in that, he could be a dominant force.
What about Wieskamp? I liked what he did at times, but then there were some patchy performances late in the season. And again, he would be better next season. I like the character. I like the ability to shoot the ball. I would like a little bit more consistency in lieu of streakiness. But his athleticism is really attractive.
But none of those pieces like Wieskamp have to be rushed, I don't think, because they are. And again, we talk about Jordan Crawford now in his role. If he's going to come off the bench around different teams, I know we'd like to see him in certain situations, but you let other big dominoes fall, and if the mutual interest is there, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, we see you filling this role with potential to continue to grow that. I think Wieskamp would fit in that mold.
And I guess we're bumping Derek Walton Jr. out.
Correct.
Seems to be.
Big money.
Derek Walton Jr. does have an interest in staying in the NBL.
Yep.
He won't be with the Phoenix. And on Wieskamp, he was on a really sizable contract this past season. And I don't know if another NBL team will pay up to that number. And by the same token, I don't know if he'd be willing to take too much less than that number. So it might just be a situation where those two parties just have different understandings or ideas or values of his market.
Well, Walton Jr. one's interesting as well. For wanting to stay in the NBL, again, I know he had hamstring injuries, he's getting a little older, but at his very best, one of the best playmakers in the league.
What about Perth?
No.
That's where I was going, man.
My fault.
But that's where I'm going. Again,
It's a really good idea for me. It's a really great.
if you miss out on the
thought.
Delhi sweepstakes, but you can lock in a marquee level center. If you imagine you get JLA and a Derek Walton Jr. type, and if it's not Derek Walton Jr., maybe you can go and get Jalen Adams. You can go and get these proven imports in the NBL. They're not afraid to spend the money. It does seem like that would work well.
2 hamstring injuries in one season.
It's a worry. For sure it's a worry.
Well, I was someone who had a lot of hamstring injuries, and I know you come back. So from my perspective, it's not a concern.
It'd be a concern for Perth based on what Olgun was saying with their depth. As of where it stands right now, to have guys that, because it's significant time that you will miss, who can step into that void. Foxwell did a great job this year. Angus Glover, they've picked that up together. Based on what they have right now, it would be a concern.
Question from JB via social media asking about Sunday Detch. We've spoken about him in the lead up to this show as potentially looking for a new home. Interest around the league for him?
Yeah, so there were initial chats with Sunday and the 36ers. They weren't able, from at least right now, to come to terms on a number. Again, there's just both parties are just way off as far as his value. Sunday's camp thinks one thing and Adelaide thinks another. The Brisbane Bullets are a team that is interested in Sunday Detch, and so are the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. Now, again, it'll just come down to if a team is willing to come as close to the number as he wants as possible, and over multiple seasons. You know, you theoretically look at Sunday Detch and think this might be one of his last contracts of him in his prime. So how can he maximise that over multiple seasons? But you look at Sunday Detch, and it's a high-level defender, someone who shot the ball at a high clip this season, shooting the ball from the corners at a really high level. So he's an extremely valuable player off the court. He's probably even better. A really high-quality guy. But those are the 3 teams that are still sort of in the mix for him.
The price tag's high.
Yeah, but you could see the essence of that team, and I mean the LA 36ers, improve when he got healthy late in the season. When he came back in, he added a dimension that they didn't have. And if you look at the Brisbane Bullets, again, he would be extremely additive to that program, and there are a lot of minutes for him to play there.
For sure, and again, he's unique and one of the best winged and guard defenders in the league. He's proven that. So the price tag is high, yes, but when you are playing him in the right position, you're playing him in the right team, it's worth that.
Yeah.
It is worth that. So Bullets make sense. I heard the Taipans a couple of months ago thrown around there. I don't think they would go down that path, but that you could kind of see that make sense for a bit of an increased role. I don't think I see him back in Adelaide. I think other teams will help. We keep going back to the Wildcats just because of the money they have to spend, but you could slot him in there. At the 2, if you have a point guard, Windler at the 3, Doolittle at the 4.
Can I suggest another place? And I don't know if there's interest, but it seems like Melbourne United could have used him in Game 5.
Yep.
I haven't heard of interest.
It's
from
hard
Melbourne
because
United.
you would fully expect Shaylee to return there, so you fully expect Shaylee to be there. Golding's there. Dash Daniels is the next star. As we said, the Delhi domino, if that doesn't go their way, which we keep talking about, that doesn't seem like it, but it still has a chance to do it. So say no Delhi. you'd look at Ian Clark. I'd be bringing back Ian Clark then if you can. And then you'd slot in. There's still probably not as big of a role there than he would have on other teams.
And the money that he wants.
Olgun, it's interesting. So it's 10:25 local time. We've been going for nearly 90 minutes here on Marketplace Live, and we haven't spoken about Kendrick Davis. Now, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, he would have been at the top of all of our rundowns, and we're going to hit on this guy, we're going to hit on this guy. But as time's gone on and we've got closer to the start of free agency, it seems as though there's less interest around the league in Kendrick Davis. Would that be fair?
Yeah, so the 36ers won't be bringing Kendrick Davis back. Other teams have put some thought into it, but it does feel like they're in the process of seeking intel on him. So they're speaking with the Golden State Warriors during his time with their G League team. They're trying to gauge some of the stories that you hear around the NBL season. How viable is this guy on our team, and can we have a realistic chemistry to be able to compete at a high level consistently? That's what teams are asking. The talent is obviously undeniable. Runner-up for MVP, he put up unbelievable production. But that's the question that teams are asking. Can we bring in Kendrick Davis, and will he be a net positive to our team on and off the court? So I think that's what is giving a lot of teams some cold feet about immediately putting a contract in front of him.
Well, Hools, we heard all the noise and we saw the smoke throughout the course of the season around the 36ers. And if he was not the focal point of a lot of that noise, he was certainly on the periphery. And some teams probably aren't going to be willing to fly that close to the sun as the 36ers were during this past season. But you get a guy that can change.
You got to weigh it up, right?
He can change your season.
For sure.
Like,
he walks into 30 and 10.
Problem is,
that's what.
And
he
again,
is.
what hurts that?
But that's not the issue, right?
No,
It's
what
not
hurts
all the
that
issue.
a little bit more is the say we're a 10-team league, and the Australian basketball community is very small. Once one whispers out there, everyone hears it within 24 hours.
But the hard part in his defense, we don't know.
No, exactly.
We don't have any concrete evidence
but there's
ourselves.
more than 1-2 things out there which hurts in that regard.
Yes.
But again, you see where he could be. If he comes back to the NBL next year, he's a runaway favourite for the MVP. He's unguardable, and he's proven that. He can take over games, but all that other stuff that it comes with, I'd love to see him back. I just don't see it this season.
And we'll stress this isn't our opinion either. This is just factually, this is the intel that exists, not just around Australian basketball, but around world basketball and NBA basketball. The intel on him is not outstanding, and that's what gives teams pause.
If there was one team in this league who would back their culture and their leadership and gamble on Kendrick Davis, who would it be?
I've spoken to some teams about this, on whether if you surround Kendrick Davis with elite culture pieces, can you sort of help that intel shift in a positive direction? Again, it's the perception of the intel. I still think there are concerns about would he drag everyone else to what is perceived to be his level, right? So I don't know if there's a team that would be willing to do that, because again, you're just putting yourself in a very precarious, risky situation with someone like that. Because you get to the midway point of a season and you can't do anything at that point.
Do you think Sydney might have enough infrastructure in terms of culture to be able to?
You got to understand, he costs too now.
Well, that's the thing. Well,
They've also just put a pretty strong assistant coach as part of their staff from here on in.
Do you think they have enough framework to be able to keep him harnessed and able to perform at the same level without taking away from the rest of the group?
One of the questions that arose when Davis first signed with the 36ers, and again, this is the intel that exists around world basketball.
That's Sydney, by the way. If he was to choose Sydney or they were to choose him, that's the way their roster looks.
One of the questions was, could Davis coexist with another alpha? Right? That was a question that a lot of people around world basketball asked. And we saw him on a team with DJ Vasiljevic, Montrezl Harrell joined the fray. So it's like, these are absolute alphas in this league. And it didn't work. Right, we heard all the stories out of Adelaide. What is Brian Goorjian? What is Andrew Bogut? If they get Matthew Dellavedova, Delly is probably more malleable.
Can't get both.
Yeah.
So there's
luxury tax it just about fund another team.
And so again, you think of, can they coexist? It's very difficult to see it happening.
The other side of it is you can put a small little asterisk on the fact of it wasn't just, there was a lot of other moving pieces around Adelaide that dysfunctionally didn't work out. So you can't give it all that, but again, the intel, I was in Summer League last year, that is the kind of intel that you hear, but there's no doubting that he's be Strong favourite to win an MVP, and he can turn your season around on the positive note. I'd love to see him back. He's such an exciting player to watch, but I haven't heard anything else.
But looking at that Sydney roster, say there's no Delhi, say they're unsuccessful with that recruit, and Kendrick isn't a possibility. Parker Jackson Cartwright is the guy.
He's someone's guy in this league.
Now, I'll ask you this.
He steps in there perfectly, in my opinion.
So I heard a couple of months ago that he was open to, or wanted to come back to the NBL around the rest of the league, that there was interest there from him and his party. What happened with the New Zealand Breakers now with all the changes there? Does that change things? I'm not sure. Have you heard any more?
I haven't heard too much. I'm still under the impression that he's not against a return to the NBL. And I'm with you. I like Sydney just from a play style perspective too. That's a team that wants to run. Jalen Adams wasn't a point guard that wanted to run. Parker Jackson Cartwright fits what they want to do really, really well.
And a lot of Parker's individual brilliance actually masks the fact that this is a serious basketball player. He wants to play the right way. He gives good effort defensively for a small guy. He still gets exploited because of his size. But this is a guy that can win you a game on his own anytime. And Sydney need his style.
He is the perfect player, I think, for Southeast Melbourne.
I'm with Phoenix.
Sorry to cut you off there.
And he fits what
that is the power move for Southeast Melbourne. I thought Bryce Cotton was the power move for Southeast Melbourne. That's probably not going to happen. Parker Jackson Cartwright, to me, is their guy.
And the toughness of Josh King as a coach isn't too dissimilar to Modi Mayor, who Parker really thrived under.
No, that's where I was going, Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, because again, if you throw Angus Glover next to him in the backcourt, you can kind of shake out a little bit what you lose height-wise defensively. But he gets enough steals, he plays quick, he's that Josh King type of guy. If I'm Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, I'm circling that as a key name to go and bring in.
Because you look at every Southeast Melbourne Phoenix game, you can see Josh King yell at whomever has the ball to get up the floor. You don't have to tell Parker Jackson Cartwright to push the ball up the floor with a ton of speed.
And you could tell at the end of last season that he was unhappy with everything that had gone on with the Breakers.
Pete, I thought the unhappiness started way before the end of the season.
Well, you ranked him 7th, mate.
That's on you, bro.
You started all of this. You started all the animosity.
I like Sydney because it means that they could play fast. And when you talk about his lack of size, you have a Bull Kowal and you have Jalen Galloway in there to sort of supplement that. It's okay.
We're on the clock a little bit here on Marketplace Live. So a couple to finish off with. One last question via social media. And again, a massive thanks to everyone for all of your questions. We haven't been able to get to them today. We also will, in future episodes of Marketplace, address some of these questions.
Let's just do a full fan question.
We actually could one day, for sure. Rain Smith, this is an interesting name from the NCAA system right now from Craig. Is Rain Smith a legitimate chance to return to Australia and his home state of Tasmania with the Jack Jumpers, or is he assessing other options?
So there are a lot of NBL teams who are interested in Rain Smith. I look at the Cairns Taipans. The Sydney Kings are a team that are interested in Rain Smith too. He's someone who at the start of the college basketball season, a lot of teams thought, maybe we can DP him, DP +1, DP +2. It's at a point now where you probably have to roster the guy.
Correct.
That's just what he is. And so there are a lot of teams interested in him. He will have a market around world basketball. I don't think he's a two-way guy, but there will be an international market for him. But the Australian market is one that, from what I understand, he's very open to.
It's good that, like you talk about the college and being a senior this year, because if he was a junior or anything, the college money flying around is a different level right now. So it's enticing, and again, we've seen what you can bring back guys from college. Taron Armstrong, Elijah Pepper, Josh Bannon, these guys who you can, after the college system, they're coming in now in the NBL. They're not biding their time. They're coming in to make an impact wherever they land.
You told me you'd be worth $750 a year in NIL.
Me?
Yeah.
Like $7.50?
No, turn it up. I would have got bagels for life.
Oh, my goodness. You told me to say that. Hey, let's finish with the Illawarra Hawks. And this is by no means disrespectful, the fact that we're talking about them last as the reigning champions. It's just as you're about to see that they're pretty settled right now. So out of all of the teams, they've probably got the least amount of transactional work to do, which is why we've left them till last.
Well, this is 3 years in a row. When Sydney won it a few years ago, they went and signed everybody up again. Tasmania did the same after they won it last year, and Illawarra have repeated. They've given Greed a new deal, Peatling a new deal, and I like it. Unfortunately, Sam Froling, we don't know how much of the season he's going to miss, but they've got to get him locked up. It's a situation we haven't seen a lot of in the NBL, where a guy goes down late in his contract season. So I'm very curious to see how they navigate through that. I'm sure you have more intel on that, but that's a very strong roster. and one that is ready. There's enough there around that axis where they can go back to back.
They can, but you still want to get a step better. We spoke about
Yeah.
this. Even with the Jack Jumpers last year, okay, they're bringing back the same crew. They lose Jack McVeigh. You won this year. Everyone wants to be a step better than the Hawks. So everyone's now putting a roster together to beat the reigning champs. The reigning champs have to get a step better too. So they've got a couple of spots, a couple of free agent places where they can go and do that, upgrade a little bit. Sam Frolling's the one that hurts. Maybe December we can see him back in action. But you got to do right by him, firstly. Everything that he's done, everything that he's achieved with the Allura Hawks, still has the interest around the rest of the league. But that's just a really, really shocking timing injury for him.
Yeah, their continuity is really cool, and they've had it over the past couple seasons. They'll have it again. Again, Peatling, Greeter, these are really important pieces to bring back. Dan Greeter's impact in the last 2 games of that championship series, you can't stress enough how important he was. They're in talks with Todd Blanchfield about returning.
Yep.
He has some interest from around the league, but that's someone who they want to get done, and he was also super important over the course of the playoffs. So that's that, and they're in preliminary talks with Trey Kell. That seems very early, though. I don't think he'll make a decision anytime soon, Trey Kell, but that's someone they want to bring back. Again, Game 5, he was a superstar.
Couple of quick hitters before we finish off here on Marketplace Live, and I'll just throw them to you at random. Pete, McQuatch Malawatch,
Got a lot of
where do we
interest.
think he lands?
Yeah, he's got interest around the league for sure. I mean, there's certain teams you kind of see where it would fit. More opportunity. Again, we keep going down. There's certain guys with certain coaching styles. He's a Josh King type of guy. Would he fit well in a backup spot potentially? But there's other teams who would like him as well.
Derek, Keandre Cook, you saw a lot of him at Brisbane next season. Is there a home for Keandre Cook somewhere next year?
I think he's a really good secondary import, shoots the ball well, athletic, can create his own shot, probably not as aggressive enough on a consistent basis, but I like a fit at Tasmania, and I also like a fit at Melbourne United.
On McQuatch Malawatch, the Sydney Kings really want to bring him back. The 36ers, the Phoenix, the Perth Wildcats, these are all teams that have shown some interest in McQuatch Malawatch.
Yeah.
That's good news.
I like him in Perth.
It's good news for him. And a good news story to potentially finish off is Harry Froling, who's now back playing basketball in the NBL and leads the competition in rebounds, if you don't mind. So he's come back with a bang. Someone's picking up Harry Froling next year, aren't they? Surely.
Feels like it, especially when we talk about the dearth of local big men. He is someone who I'm told Melbourne United is showing some sort of interest in him. The 36ers have reached out about him. They want to see more sample size, though. They want to see how can he guard defensively? How does he handle adversity, the ups and downs of a New Zealand NBL season? Once they see that, I think there'll be a team that'd be willing to pull the trigger, but I think they just want to see a bit more from him.
Sat down with him for a Huddle podcast that will come out soon. And again, just hearing the way he now lives his life, the things that he learned, the things that he would have done better if he had his time again pre the horrific incident he had to go through, just as a professional athlete, the understanding of that and what he wants to do now. He's still only 26.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's playing very well. You talk about what he could do. I mean, this is the former Rookie of the Year. The talent's there. And now it looks like the attitude, mindset, everything else is there. Everything's on the right path. It's a phenomenal story. It's an unbelievably emotional story. For a team to take a chance on that, is it even a chance now? That's the other thing. It's like he's proven it, as you said, over the NBL. If he continues to do this, seems like a no-brainer. It'd be great to have him back in the
And
league.
he's a big body, can stretch the floor. He's an outstanding passer and
Can
a
shoot
very
the
good
rock, yeah.
rebounder. And maybe somewhere like Cairns to get his feet wet again in the league, somewhat close to Townsville and home. He can get himself settled and then look to branch out.
And then the last quick hitter, which is the perfect way for us to finish off, is back where we started on Matthew Dellavedova. If we're expecting a decision potentially by the end of the weekend, I want one-word answers from all of you, and no more than one word. Where is Delly playing next season?
Sydney.
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 I'm
Sorry, that's where I think it is.
going to be the different one then. I think he ends up in Perth.
Okay.
Yeah, which would make for a very, very interesting scenario for them. Hey, great work, everyone. There's a lot to work through. There are a lot of questions that we didn't get a chance to get to. A couple of names that we didn't really get to dive into the way we would like to as well. But we've got to follow the bouncing ball on day one of free agency. And there's still a lot to play out, Olgun.
There's still most of it to play out. These were the first dominoes to fall, but once Delhi happens, once Flynn Cameron happens, I feel like we'll get an avalanche.
Well, once some more pieces fall, then we can start looking at which teams are really a threat to win this thing.
Oh, it's way too early for all that.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
Who's winning next year?
What are you going to bet on it?
Sydney.
Oh, here we go
get
again.
out.
Here we go.
You still got your punishment
Here
to
we
this
go.
off-season
You haven't
too.
even done this year's punishment. You want to
I'll
start
be getting a message from Gorge. Why are you putting that pressure on us again, dude?
No wonder he texted me yesterday and said, when can I do a top 15? We don't even know who's playing in this league next season. Hey, great stuff, you three. Fantastic job. Great work for our team behind the scenes as well. To put together a live episode is a mountain of work. So well done to all of our team for making it happen at NBL HQ. And most importantly to you, the fans, for watching in your droves again this morning. All of your questions, all of your social media interaction. Best way to stay up to date is nbl.com.au and, of course, the NBL social media channels. And who knows, we might be back sooner rather than later talking about where Matthew Dellavedova lands. Thanks for joining us on Marketplace Live.